One of the most important parts about being in a dynasty fantasy league is understanding when you have to rebuild and how you have to rebuild. Now, the first thing I want to mention is don't be scared to rebuild. It's actually pretty fun. Today, I'm going to be kind of going over how you should look at rebuilding, when you should do it, what you need to look at, and how to go about it. I actually just kind of am in the middle of a rebuild in one of my leagues, so I'm going to kind of show you why I decided to rebuild and then kind of how I went about that rebuild. And like I said, don't be scared to rebuild. It's actually pretty fun trying to just work the trade market, trying to get as much young assets as you can, and then draft day is really your time to shine. So without saying much less, let's get right into it. The first step of any rebuild is looking at your roster. You need to go down your roster and look at what positions am I weak at, and do I need a rebuild? Am I going to be able to contend, or do I need a rebuild? So for example, my team, I'm going to show you guys here some of the players on my team. Basically, I went for kind of an all-in draft when we started this league. I was kind of new to Dynasty. I just went all in to win, and I ended up with tons of older running backs. Like I ended up with McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, and then I didn't draft a lot of quarterbacks. It's a super flex league. And then I decided to make my moves, and I got my quarterbacks were Tom Brady and Trey Lance. Now you guys are probably looking like, okay, I already see where this man went wrong. My receivers were like Mike Williams, Mike Evans. So this draft was pretty good for like a year, and then it just fell off a cliff. So I had to make some moves, and I think in order to get a quarterback, I tried making some moves for a quarterback, trading some assets for a quarterback to still contend, but there wasn't really anything happening. It was going to be too hard. So I said, you know what? If I rebuild, what can I do? So I looked at my team. I said, I need quarterback and receiver. And when you're starting a rebuild, you want to build around quarterbacks and receivers. Don't build around running backs. Running backs have such short lifespans. Don't go out trading for Bijan and Brees Hall. You want to go get young receivers and quarterbacks. So I looked at it and I said, okay, I need to rebuild. So the first step, once I look at my team and realize I need to rebuild and I want to build around quarterbacks and receivers, I don't have either. So I need to trade the assets on my team to get younger in that. And the next step after you decide you want to rebuild is look to the draft and see, is it really worth rebuilding through the draft, or do I need to go trade for young guys? For me, I looked at it and last year I looked at it and I said, I need quarterback and I need receiver. And then I was like, let me go look at this next year's rookie class and see if it's going to be worth it. And I'm looking at Caleb Williams. I'm looking at Marvin Harrison. I'm looking at Malik Neighbors. And I'm like, yes, that is what I need to do. I need to go acquire draft picks, and I need to try everything in my power to go get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison. If I'm like this year and I'm looking at, and I'm like, hey, I need quarterbacks. My quarterback's bad and I need to rebuild. I mean, you could look towards looking to get like Carson Beck and Shador, but honestly, you might be better off trying to go trade for Drake May or JJ McCarthy. Look at the draft class now. If you want to know this next 2025 rookie class, if you want to kind of preview to determine whether or not you should be looking at the draft class or young guys in the league, I'm going to be dropping a Dynasty preview video later this week where I'm going to look at all the positions that are coming up. Now, a lot's going to change, but I'm going to highlight quarterbacks, running backs, receivers in a first round mock draft to show you guys kind of what this class is shaping up to be. But that's the next step. You got to decide, is this draft worth it, or should I go for young guys? Once you make that decision, that's going to target who you aim. So the three kind of potential players you want to aim for in a rebuild, there's three categories. There's picks, which I just mentioned. If you're looking to build through the draft class, if you have a draft class like this year is strong with running backs or in receivers, if you want to build through the draft class and get those guys, aim for picks. Try and get as many firsts, seconds as you can, and try and build up youth so you have as many shots as you can at young players. The second category is just young players in the league already. This is why I mentioned, like, if you're wanting a quarterback, I mean, you can try and hope like Carson Beck becomes a really good prospect or Shador, but you might be better off just aiming for the JJ McCarthys, the Drake Mays, the Bo Nixes, and hoping that those guys will develop into your guys. So you aim for young guys. Then the last category is a little sketchy, and it depends more certain, but it's hurt and suspended guys. Because if you have another contender in the league and they have a guy who's hurt, you might want to target those. So let me go ahead and take you through my team and how I looked at this step. So I looked at it. I needed quarterbacks. I said, okay, I'm going to make sure I get the first overall pick. Now, I'm tanking legally. I'm not like playing my best players. So in order to tank legally, what you need to do is you need to get rid of your good players, because I'm playing my best players. They're just not good. So I looked at anyone on my team who was older and good, I need to get rid of. So I had Geno Smith. He's got to go. Christian McCaffrey, I want to flip him for some young receivers just because I'm not ready to compete now. Christian McCaffrey's got to go. Mark Andrews, he was a little bit of an iffy one, but I thought he had to go. I want to get assets for him. And then Joe Mixon, he's got to go. He's too old. So you look at those older guys and you want to get rid of all those guys so you can. And I said, I'm going to get the first pick. Now I need to figure out a way to get that second pick. And then, because if I can get Caleb and Marv, I'm going to be set. So I started looking for it and I found out you want to target those. It's hard because sometimes if someone realizes they're rebuilding, look at the bad teams in your league. Find out who the bottom 3 teams are and see where their picks are. If they have their picks and they're a smart player and they're rebuilding, it's gonna be very hard to get those picks. You might not be able to get those and you might have to target elsewhere. But this was the dream scenario for me because the guy who I thought was gonna be a bottom 3 team, I looked at him, he didn't have his pick. Another person had their pick. So I said, okay, I need to go get this pick from this player and bank on this being a top. So you got to trade those assets. I ended up trading Kenneth Walker to get that second overall pick. Like I said, get rid of running backs, man. Running backs don't have long lifespans. If you're rebuilding, get young receivers and quarterbacks. So I basically decided I'm going to stack up on these receivers and picks. I got the second pick. I ended up flipping McCaffrey for Jalen Waddle to get some youth at receiver. Looking back, I mean, this was before McCaffrey completely blew up on the Niners. But, I mean, still, I wasn't going to be able to use him. My team wasn't good enough to compete. So I flipped him, got those assets. And then the last move I made, I told you, I stacked up on picks. You know, I went for the first pick. I went for the second pick, stacked up on picks. I went young. I went ahead and traded for Jalen Waddle. I got a bit younger at receiver. I went ahead. And then the last one I made was aiming for hurt dudes. This could be a key because for my example that I did last year was I looked at Kyler Murray, who was still on injured reserve off of, I believe it was an ACL tear, and he wasn't playing, and there was a dude who was competing for a title who had him. So I looked at it and I said, I think I can get Kyler Murray because I don't need him to play this year. I'm actually happy with him just sitting on IR this year because I'm not trying to win. So he's the perfect target because he's not going to play. He's not going to win me games this year, but he's going to be a top guy in the next year. So I looked at Kyler Murray, went talked to the dude. He was competing. I ended up flipping up. It was like Geno Smith and Joe Mixon, and ended up getting Kyler Murray, and that was perfect for me because I got a guy who was younger. He was hurt. He wasn't going to play this year. So these hurt guys now, there's not that many hurt guys yet this year. We might have some guys get hurt this year. The only 2 dudes I could think of this year that are kind of fit in this category of if you're rebuilding, really aim for them. The number 1 target is JJ McCarthy. If you are a rebuilding team, you should be targeting JJ McCarthy because he will not play this year. He's not going to win you weeks this year, but he's still a really good asset. He's going to be the Vikings starting quarterback. We saw the upside in the preseason. He was looking pretty good in the preseason. So I think if you can buy JJ McCarthy low, go for it. I think he's a perfect target. And the only other one that I thought for now that could be really good is if Rashee Rice ends up getting suspended, or if someone in your league is just really scared about his suspension, he could be a good guy to go and target because especially if he does get suspended and he's on a contender's team, he's a good guy to go ahead and target, and a guy that maybe, you know, this guy's scared, wants to trade him away. You don't care about his suspension. You're not competing this year. He can sit on your IR. He doesn't take a roster spot. So you go and get him, and just a guy that you can sit on your IR. And then once you have those dudes that you can sit on your IR and taxi squad, you just take those high upside rookies, you know, you just go out, see what kind of rookies like this year, like Jermaine Burton, Javon Baker, Jalen McMillan. If you have extra roster spots, just go get these super high upside rookies, throw them on your roster. You don't need these old guys. You should be looking to trade every old guy on your roster possible away for picks and stuff. I ended up with mine. I ended up getting the first pick, the second pick, the 10th pick, and I had my 201 pick, and I ended up going from this old team that you could see where my team's led by Trey Lance, Tom Brady, Geno Smith, Joe Mixon, Christian McCaffrey, T. Higgins, Mike Evans. I ended up going from all of that to my new team where I got Marvin Harrison. I ended up flipping this trade. I wasn't as, this trade was a little bit more iffy, but I ended up flipping Kyler Murray for Bryce Young and the 110. That's a pick. I don't know, I could go back, and I really believe in Bryce Young, so I don't think it's an awful trade yet, but we'll see how Bryce Young turns out. But that's the only trade but I still got 110, and I got Brock Bowers. So now, I got Bryce Young, Caleb Williams. At my running backs, I ended up picking Devon Achane last year. He's a good example of like just high upside shots you need to take. I got Jonathan Brooks coming back. And then at receiver this year, I got Waddle, like I said, I trade for. I got T. Higgins. I got Marvin Harrison. Drafted JSN last year. Tank Dell, I picked up off the waiver wire last year. I drafted Brock Bowers. I I basically rebuilt my team into a super young team, and this is, I think, how you got to target it. My team might still not be good this year, so my plan this year in the second year of the rebuild. So first year of the rebuild, gather all the young guys, and then the second year, I'm gonna wait a couple weeks and see how good Caleb and Marv are. Because if Caleb and Marv are as good as I think they could be in year one, I mean, I got a chance to contend, and then I can start making a couple different moves, and I go from a rebuilding team to a contending team. If not, if they still aren't as good as they potentially could be, and this is basically my year two of my rebuild, my steps I'm going to take aren't as I'm not taking the drastic steps like I did in year one, because now I'm competing next year. Even if I'm bad this year, next year's my year to compete. So I'm not going to go trade Waddle and T just because they're older. I'm going to need those guys next year. So I'm probably going to be a middling team this year, but I can still do the second part I mentioned where I'm going to be trading for young guys. So if I still have any leftover older guys, like I got Sam Darnold. If I end up struggling a little this year, you can flip Sam Darnold to contender, either get picks, go get a dude like Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy. I shouldn't have mentioned Michael Penix is another great guy to target if you're rebuilding. Now they're in that same territory as McCarthy, but go target those guys. Target some really young receivers with high upside, and then just kind of start stashing my bench with high upsides, intending for next year to be the year, but I'm not going to be a complete rebuild. That first year is when you tear apart your roster. Get all the picks in first and second year guys as you possibly can. And then the second year, determine whether your team's going to be good enough to compete or not. And if it's not, do a little middle rebuild, keep some middle-aged good assets, but trade away your older and gear up for that next year. Anyways, that's how I went about my rebuild. Let me know you guys' thoughts in the comments, but that's kind of the general outline I follow. To recap the outline, look at your team, figure out what positions you need and if you should rebuild or not. Then you need to look at the draft class. Is this draft class going to help me, or do I need to target young players in the league and not really bank on draft picks? The fourth step, target young, hurt, and picks in the guys, people that aren't going to help you win this year but can help you in the future. And then take advantage of contending teams that really have holes in the roster. Go look at, like, if there's a dude that's top 3 in your league and they really need a receiver, go be that savior and help him with the receiver. And then the last thing I'm going to leave off of the video is, maybe it's against the will and good human nature of fantasy football, but if you have someone in your league who is a bad team that doesn't understand rebuilding and just thinks their team is good, even though you look at it and objectively their team is not good, take advantage of them, man. Take advantage of the bad teams in your league. If there's like a team that you look at, you're like, that's a bottom 4 team, but they think they're a contender, grab their picks, grab their young players, take advantage of these bad teams, and just grab as many assets as you can. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Make sure you check out later this week my Dynasty preview video for the 2025 rookie class if you are planning on rebuilding, and see what guys you should be looking for in the draft class.